Here at home, our worst week since the '87 crash. In the US, stock market falls that haven't been seen since the Great Depression, down 25% in a month. The free market became the free fall market. The UK, Germany and France tumbling 27%, and then to Asia, Hong Kong dropping 23%, Japan 32%. And of course, Australia hasn't been immune to this economic crisis. Last year, our stock market was at record levels, dizzying heights, and then it started to plummet. From its peak last November to its low on Friday, our markets lost 42%, $750 billion wiped away. And the question no one can answer is how much further this has to go.
Eventually, it does hit a bottom, but no one can know when the bottom is until it stops.
That share market, of course, is where much of our superannuation is invested. And for the average Australian in a balanced fund, this crash just cost you around 20% of your super. But unless you absolutely have to cash up, experts say don't tamper with it, it's too late.
For people to be selling out of shares now and moving into cash, I think that what they're doing is they're throwing their money away, essentially.
If you're retired, consider part-time work to top it up. If you're on the verge of retirement, delay.
I think people will have to work longer, and I'm talking about 3 to 5 years longer.
Think long-term. It will bounce back. 2 other tips.
I'm sure you take an active involvement in your home or in your child's education. You need to take an active involvement in your superannuation.
For people whose balances have dropped, it is worth contacting Centrelink and working out whether or not they're entitled to an age pension.
Shareholders too are being told not to panic sell. In fact, the time for buying could be close. Some shares weather hard times.
I believe it'll be the agriculture. I think resources will do quite well.
And the 3 that always survive and thrive through downturns: tobacco, alcohol and gambling. Though it could be a while before we're back at last year's levels.
How long is it going to take to move back up? Yes, it could take another 20 years, could take another 30 years.
Let's hope not. Chris Reason reporting there. With me now is market analyst Craig James. Craig, we just had a prediction of 20 years or more for the market to recover. For every Aussie whose super is in shares, that's pretty gloomy news. What should we be doing about it?
Well, I think the gloomsters are wrong. It's not going to take 20 years to recover. We saw a bigger crash back in 1987. It was bigger in 1929 as well. And it didn't take 20 years to recover after the 87 share market crash. In fact, if you invested in late October 87 and the share market still had another 13% to fall, by August of the following year, you would have made 20%. So we believe that the share market will start recovering fairly soon. But it's going to take a long time to get up to those record highs that we saw of November of last year. It could take 3, 4, 5 years to get to those sorts of levels.
So you believe the share market's close to the bottom?
The share market is pretty much close to the bottom. Some of the companies on the Australian share market are trading at bargain basement levels. We've got a price earnings or valuation level of our share market at the cheapest levels in 24 years. Really, some companies just don't justify their share prices at these sorts of levels.
OK, so stick with your super. Interest rates as well. We saw the Reserve Bank cut official interest rates 1% last week. A real shock. How many more rate cuts to come? Over what period of time?
Well, back in 2001, when the US was in recession, Australian interest rates got to 4.25%. We're currently sitting at 6%, and this 6% level of cash rate is actually still tight monetary policy. So the Reserve Bank's got a fair bit that it can go. We believe that we can get down to around about 4.5%, 5% over the next year or so.
OK. Big question I keep getting asked. If everything's hunky-dory here, why has the Australian dollar dropped so much?
What investors are worried about overseas is a global recession or global downturn, and therefore you buy less iron ore, less coal, therefore you're buying less of our resources, so less need for the Aussie dollar. But we've got to remember that the soggy Aussie is actually a very good thing. It helped us back in the Asian financial crisis. It helped us back in 2001. A low Australian dollar helps our exporters, helps our farm sector, helps our economy.
Yes or no? Are we headed for recession?
No. Simple answer, no. If there was a chance, 10, 20%, but our Australian economy's in great shape.
All right, Craig, thank you for that. Appreciate your time. We're now joined by the opposition leader, Malcolm Turnbull. Mr Turnbull, has the government gone far enough to shore up Australia's financial system?
Oh, the government's steps today are very welcome. We will give them very strong support in the Parliament.
OK, so you can absolutely guarantee you'll back the government, full bipartisan support to this rescue package, all of it?
Yeah, absolutely. The deposit guarantee and the further investment in the mortgage market were actually recommended. In expansion of the guarantee and further investment in the mortgage market were recommended by us. So we're delighted the government is doing this, and as I've said, we will support the government in getting any necessary legislation through the Parliament.
Any more they can do? Anything else they should be looking at?
Well, they should be looking at everything. That's why, Koshi, we're so keen to sit down and talk about this with them in a constructive bipartisan way. My only disappointment today is that I wrote to Mr Rudd 3 weeks ago and said this challenge is very big. In the national interest, we should sit down and look at how we can deal with it in the immediate term on a bipartisan basis. Now, he hasn't even responded to the letter. So that offer is still open. I think Australians want to see their leaders working together, pooling their resources and their ideas to get the best result for Australia. OK,
Malcolm Turnbull, thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Well, we've had a dream run of low record unemployment in this country, but is that all about to change as world economy slow and a credit crunch hits us? A lot of people reckon a booming China will protect us. So are they right? Here's our political editor, Mark Riley.
John Roberts had been working for Mitsubishi for 29 years when his boss gave the talk all workers dread.
When someone comes and tells you, no, sorry mate, you haven't got a job, it is a big shock.
He's retrained and now runs his own small business.
I can't see the car industry really surviving the way that it is now.
Unemployment was at a record low when Mitsubishi crashed. The budget predicted it would stay below 5%. That's now out the window.
Likely to be higher than has been projected. We don't have numbers on that.
Respected economist Bob Gregory does.
I'd be taking good odds on 6, 7 at least by the end of next year.
A jump to 7% unemployment would put between another 300,000 and 500,000 people out of work. The industries where jobs are most at risk are building, manufacturing, mining and retail.
Businesses will not want to have to reduce their employment levels, but ultimately employment is a product of the level of business activity.
The boom in mineral sales to China has acted like a security blanket to Australia, but now even China's feeling the pinch.
China is nowhere near the short-run security blanket that we might have thought of 6 months ago.
What we're seeing is some pushback from the Chinese on some of the raw materials exports to that country.
Mr Lawcock doesn't agree with predictions the mineral boom is over.
I think this is a bump in the road.
I think businesses are steeling themselves for some tougher economic times, and as a nation we need to steel ourselves for some tougher economic times.
And tougher times for some families.
There was one guy who worked for me, he just got married, just bought a house, found out his wife was pregnant and he finds out he's losing his job. So that was a big, for him, he was devastated.
Whatever the circumstances are, it will be important for Australians to think flexibly about their employment opportunities to make sure their skills are maintained.
Flexibility, like going from making cars to making sandwiches.